Preseta, Lotu-Iiga.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Tertiary Education. What changes is the government making to ensure student services levies are fairer to students?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I announced last week that the government intends to seek to pass legislation shortly to ensure that large unjustified increases in compulsory non-academic student levies become a thing of the past. The legislation will give power to the Minister of Tertiary Education to require institutions to consult students on the charges and the range of services provided. Over the past few years, we've seen a trend emerge where levies have increased in some institutions by as much as 400% in a single year. I cannot accept that these exorbitant increases reflect a commensurate increase in services offered.
David Shearer. I beg your pardon. I have called David Shearer. It is most unusual. I apologise to the member for my mistake with David Shearer.
Speaker, does the Minister agree with the University of Canterbury Vice-Chancellor Rod Carr that the reason student levies have increased so dramatically in recent years is because students are getting a, quote, a crap deal from the government which is refusing to fund higher education at the levels it should?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
No, I don't agree with that comment at all. And in fact, New Zealand has one of the most generous student support systems in the world. In New Zealand, we pay 75% of the tuition fees for students. We subsidise a student loan scheme, which writes off at about 45 cents on the dollar for every student. And we also pay student allowance for many students as well. It is the most generous system in the world. That's right.
Lotu-Iiga.
Supplementary to the Minister. What plans does the government have to ensure accountability by tertiary institutions in the setting of the types of student services provided?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, institutions will be required to consult students on the range of services provided and report on how they have spent the levies. They must state what services the levies provide, must account transparently about their expenditure, consult with students on the expenditure and publish clear expectations in their annual reports. I'm concerned that the cost of what can only be described as core services have sometimes been passed on to students when the cost of these services should have been included in the tuition fees paid by the students. The government, as I said earlier, funds 75% of the cost of tuition on average for students, and I intend to ensure the students and taxpayers get the benefit from that funding.
Question. David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How will, as the bill says, quote, ensure greater involvement of students in decision-making, end quote, how will that be achieved when student associations that the providers will be dealing with will be degraded and possibly destroyed by the Education Freedom of Association bill that his government is supporting?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, well, they could only be degraded or destroyed if students don't value the services they provide. So I think that's the challenge with that particular assertion. But the universities and other institutions will have the responsibility to consult with their student bodies, and I imagine that will include the student associations.
Question number 12, Grant Robertson.